Hello everyone, this is Cross, and I just started a brand new 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons campaign. I would like to go over session recap, how to prep for a brand new campaign, maybe some DM tips, and hopefully you guys will get some info along the way. So let's get right into it. I normally take very few notes. I am a more of a freestyle kind of DM. I can go into a session with just a few lines of notes and make something of it. Um, I went a little more in depth in preparation for this campaign. I had about a month to prepare. So I designed calendar. I designed some currency, and I designed a lot of the layout of the world, at least the starting area. Um, what are the main cities? How are their relationships to each other? I connected a road between a lot of the major cities, and then began naming some of the roads and started figuring out some of this lore and detail. It wasn't until the day before the session that I decided I was going to actually start creating what are the players going to do. I had these backgrounds. I had um, integrated those into the world. They were kind of intersecting in an interesting way. I encourage my players to keep their backstories private. Introduce everything in game. Everything as much as you can. Introduce it in the game, um, and slowly start giving these players the ability to discover your character with you. So normally I do not type out written material. I just say it on the fly. Um, but this time I wanted to have a specific um, introduction to the game, and I had to do one thing that a lot of DMs almost get lost at right at the very beginning. Where do I start? Uh, you know, you'll see on forums a lot. Where do I start my game? And you'll see replies that say, absolutely do not start your campaign in a tavern. I don't understand that advice. I think it's bad advice. Taverns are a great meeting place. It's where a lot of people are just relaxing, sitting at a table, and they're willing to start conversation. It's a generally non-threatening atmosphere. Um, and honestly, how are these strangers? I mean, they could meet on a road, but if they're within these tavern walls, at least you have that control um, to put them together. It's not necessarily the way that I would do it every time, but it is the way I did it this time. Um, but there's ways to make the you all meet in a tavern interesting. So I actually started the campaign narrating a NPC. His name was Jonathan. The first thing he does is say goodbye to his wife. Um, and then he says, he's going to go say goodbye to everyone. Jonathan is a merchant. He is going from the city of Rhyhill, where we decided our campaign was going to start, and he is going to move to Temra, which is the capital city of the kingdom. This is where the king lives. And he is going to become a merchant, and he's going to sell goods all over the kingdom of Tanasi. Great. Um, so I narrated him going through this town, uh, introduced some of the people that he would pass by. He's greeting, he's waving. Then he steps into a blacksmith and gains a short sword that he had ordered, pays for it, um, and then decides he's going to go to the tavern. So, several things. I was able to narrate the layout of the city to the players. I was able to introduce them to a blacksmith NPC that was available for them if they chose to go there. And then walk into the tavern that we had predetermined that all these characters were going to be at. What I did was I had several taverns in this town already prepped. I set them down for a session 0, and I said, I would like to start the campaign in the city of Rye Hill, as good a place as any. And then, here's these taverns. And the one that they chose was the Drunken Monkey. Great. So now we're in the Drunken Monkey. This guy walks in, he's excited, he decides to buy the tavern a round of ale. And in doing so, he started bringing these drinks one by one to different people, different patrons within this tavern. And that allowed me to one by one introduce the characters as individuals. He brings you a drink, you player, introduce your character, give them a little time to do so, describe what they're wearing, describe their appearance, maybe give their name. They chose to kind of do it in this out of character way, which did not break the narrative. It was just, that was the information this NPC was taking in. And then it was assumed that they gave their name, when they said their name was this and their name was that, this NPC acquired their name. So he does that, one for each of the 5 characters that I currently have in the game. And then he takes a 6th drink to another table and another group, and they're currently playing cards. And this guy loses a hand, and he puts his hand up in the air, just happens to smack the drink out of Jonathan's hand, and gets pissed off at this guy. And he just absolutely just stands up and just socks him right in the mouth, making his mouth bleed. The blood goes everywhere. And he's gonna keep going. And this was the opportunity for the players as strangers to maybe stand up and intervene. These kinds of events are always gambles. You don't know who's going to stand up and intervene. You don't know who's going to just let it play out. And that's what happened. There was a mixture. A couple players immediately stood up and decided that they were going to defend this guy. 3 of the characters decided they were going to sit back and watch for a second. Unluckily, the first character that intervened, he had a critical hit rolled against him, dropping him. They're level 1 characters, dropping him instantly. Then another player kind of came in and started dealing with this guy. He's got quite a lot of hit points for this level group. And then another character decided, enough was enough, and they were going to step in. So this conflict got resolved pretty quickly, but we saw a few characters kind of step up. The ones that did got rewarded with a share of this money that the tavern owner had. He's a friend of the guy that was getting attacked, and he was just grabbing up some coins, about to say, I'm gonna give you this money if you stop this guy. And so I had these contingency plans. What happens if they don't, intervene? Well, then the fight's going to continue to this point. If they still haven't intervened, finally, this guy's going to be, I got 30 crowns to stop this man. And this is my currency. A crown is a silver piece, and a tina is a copper piece, and a lion is a gold piece, and a tamarin is a platinum piece. So he says, I've got 30 crowns to stop this man. Well, great. He tells them that there's this notice board that has these jobs, and these people fought well. So he starts saying, if you get yourself a group together, most of the notices are for laborers and for people just needing a little hand, but some of them are for people that are in real need of some help. And if you have a good enough group that you put together, then you can start tackling these jobs and maybe earn some money. Well, this discussion started pulling in the other characters. Yeah, I'm interested in making some money too. So now I've got 5 of these players, these 5 strangers, at a table in a tavern, sitting together talking about wanting to go out and make some money. Great. That is what you're aiming for. You know, don't worry about how it happened. Just be happy that it did. And that's your first goal as a DM when you're starting a brand new campaign. If you're deciding to start it in this manner of 5 strangers meeting, um, the moment that they all finally decide to get together is the crowning achievement of your first session. Um, so this guy tells him about the notice board, and then he tells him there's a guy that I know that lives in the central docks. They're currently in the northern docks, and his name's Rafferty, and he is going to help you out if you need it. If you mention my name, I'm Jonathan Merchant. He took the last name Merchant, because he's going to be a merchant. Great. Um, so now they have this lead. They can go to this notice board and find some jobs. They can talk to this guy if they have any questions about anything. So if the player is confused, if the character is confused or something, they have this entity that they can go talk to and receive some help without having to track down this Jonathan character again. Mechanically, or from a storyline perspective, you now have a goal. You have this notice board, and then you have this secondary thing going on that's going to assist the players if they are just apprehensive about what's going on. They want to know the procedure of, how do you take these jobs. They might be able to acquire some information about the town that their characters don't know. They're from all over the world, and most of them have just arrived here. So that was the point of this NPC. Why does this guy exist? Why was he mentioned? By no means is this guy a requirement. He is a tool for the story to help move the story along. If the players are needing somewhere to go or needing some extra information, even if they don't need that information, maybe they do feel that they need this information. And I think just the fact that Rafferty existed was kind of comforting that, that this was going on. And they spotted Rafferty, and they spotted the notice board about the same time when they got into the central docks. And they went to the notice board, and I will show you that I created these handouts in Roll20. And this was the 4 jobs that they could kind of look at. They immediately looked at Bandit Trouble. It was written on high quality stock, and I read these aloud. We were doing this on stream, so I was trying to let them read, but go ahead and read this out. They decided that Bandit Trouble was something they were interested in, but maybe not right now. So that one went away. Trouble in the Swamp, they liked that, they kept that, and then they did not want to deal with Missing Brother either. So now we had these 2 jobs. And so they went to Anthony first in Trouble in the Swamp, and they talked with him. And, he says that, and we can go to my notes right here. Trouble in the Swamp, we're talking to Anthony. He says, they were hunting for crocs. They seemed to have disappeared. And then something attacked him in the night. And he watched as Nathaniel, one of his 2 friends, his leg melted as the darkness claimed it was venomous liquid. And Luke was snatched up in the air and dropped from the treetops. So he's scared to go back. This guy's terrified of the woods right now, and Carista is my goddess of fate. She's the one that deals with helping the people go to the afterlife. And so he's going to pay him 100 crowns, 100 silver, and another 100 crowns when they bring back, his friends. He's basically trying to buy their loyalty with these initial 100 crowns. One of the players decided, this 100 crowns was not enough. He wanted 50 crowns per person. So this guy, I'm thinking about this guy's situation. 50 crowns per person. He takes his meaning. I want 50 crowns a person to mean I want 50 crowns a person now, and I want 50 crowns a person when we succeed. That's 500 crowns versus 200. So transporting that into gold pieces, that is 20 gold pieces versus 50 gold pieces. And if you look at the labor chart of skilled labor being, somewhere between 2 to 5 silver, 2 to 5 crowns a day, um, that's a lot of time, you know, that this guy would have to spend to make that up. And I just determined he doesn't have that kind of money. He might have it, but he's not willing to part with it because he's still got a business to run. He's still got a life to have, and he's not going to sell all the leather in his shop and sell his shop and sell all this stuff that he has and be put out on the street basically just to pay these guys to go retrieve his friends' bodies. He really wants to retrieve his friend's body, but he's got a life to lead as well. So he gets mad, and that player has his character walk out, and then they eventually agree to the 100 crowns, to go, and then he gives them these directions. He said you're going to reach the Temra Forest, and then you're going to go 2 days in the Temra Forest south. You're going to find a river. You're going to head across the river south for 5 days, and then you're going to rest. And then, so rest the fifth day. That means, don't start your fifth day and turn east. Finish your fifth day of travel, then rest, then turn east. And then head east for 3 days, and then at that point you should kind of get into this swampy area. So they agree to this. They make these notes, and then they head to Ama. Ama is the rare herb needed contact. Visit Ama's herbalist shop. And so we look at rare herb needed, and she wants them to focus on getting this arrow moss for her that only grows in the month of arrows. And I've got this calendar that we're keeping track of how much time is passing. She says, and sometimes you don't think of everything, but you've got to create a level of agency. You've got to make, like, why is this such an urgent need right now, and what kind of problems am I going to run into if I get this stuff and just wander around with it for months at a time. I didn't have those notes here, but I kind of created that on the spot as I was realizing that this was a problem. So there's mention of bandits on the ad notice board, and so she's afraid to go into the forest because she's heard of beast and bandits, and she uses the phrase, with the threat of bandits and other terrors, I decided to hire someone this year. I have, basically implying she has previously gone into the woods herself to harvest this, but this year, maybe it's a little too dangerous for her by herself to go. She's got no weapons training to go into the woods and harvest this arrow moss that only grows during the month of arrows. They never asked how much she harvested the previous year, but I had that sitting here. Last year she harvested 28 ounces. So they didn't ask that, but it was there in case they did. Harvesting the plant requires a steady, experienced hand. Do you have someone who can properly harvest without destroying the plant? And basically what she's asking here is, does someone have the herbalism tools skill? Couple people did. That was good, because she's not going to give the job to someone who's just going to rip her plants apart. And that would have been interesting if none of the players had herbalism kit proficiency. that would have caused a conflict with Ama. She would now be looking at this group like, well, there's no way you can complete my job. Why would I tell you where this plant is only for you to go there and basically destroy it? I would rather wait on someone who has the appropriate skills. And so she would have just shut them down at that point. And don't be afraid to do that for the sake of, you've got these other jobs available to you. You know, you don't get this one because you don't have the appropriate skills. And that's just based on how the players create their characters. They could have easily have created a character, none of them having herbalism, and this story would have been ground to a halt right there. But then they would have still had trouble in the swamp to go into. She says that the riverbed is 2 days south when you're in the Temrin Woods. You follow the river east. So notice here that there's this river that is a common landmark for these two different NPCs. They're not talking to each other, but they both use this river as a landmark to get to where they're going. And there was this commonality in the instructions that they got from both NPCs that you're gonna arrive at this river in 2 days. Except one guy says you're gonna cross it, and she says you're gonna head east along it for half a day travel. So what were the things that I added? Well, first, their trip into the woods to the swamp was going to take 10 days one way. And the month of arrows lasts for 28 days, and they started on the 6th. So 10 days there, 10 days back. Now you're on the 26th of arrows, and that plant is in danger of no longer being available. So there was that sense of agency. So she was scared that they were going to take too long to get her plant and miss the chance altogether, and then she was going to be ruined. Well, she's not going to be ruined. She just wouldn't get a very valuable plant for her. So I said that the plant, after you harvest it, you only have about a week to work it into a usable kind of paste, which she knows the process to do. She invented it. And one of the players asked, is this something you could teach me? And yeah, she said, you would pay me and I would become your mentor and I would teach you this, how long it takes. And then, you would learn this process. And so that established to the players, this is how you learn new skills. You're gonna get a mentor. They're gonna teach you what they know, and the information is gonna be passed from them to you. And now you can make use of this herb if you come across it. So they finished up with her, and then one of the other players had some private messaging to kind of ask some additional questions. Then they moved on and decided that they were going to rest. A couple of them decided they didn't want to. The two that didn't get free lodging and free food for helping Jonathan with his attack, essentially, they didn't get the free rooms, and they didn't want to pay 2 crowns to stay in this big communal room where the up to about 30 people can stay. They tried to sleep on the streets. Within about 10 minutes or so, some guards came by, kind of poked them and said, no, you're not going to sleep here. You need to go there's plenty of taverns, there's plenty of inns to sleep in. You're not going to sleep here. So one of them went further in, towards the woods, and the other one tried to sleep in one of the back alleys. I had him make a roll to determine kind of how well he managed to hide himself. He didn't succeed. Got found out again, and that was basically at this point I was giving him the hint that you've tried this enough. You need to go deal with go to an inn and get you a room. So he paid the 2 crowns for that. And then the next morning they went to the forest, and they spent a day getting to the forest, and then um, we took a break. Remember to take breaks. Um, but before I continue, there was something that happened at Amaz. One of the players had herbalism but didn't have nature trained, and I think I was calling for a nature check to uh, determine if you could know anything about this herb or anything like that. And I made a weird call that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Um, Trying to say that that herbalism was the act of harvesting the plant, and nature was more the knowledge of the plant. Um, Herbalism, you know, you study the plants themselves, and that's what should have happened. The herbalism skill dictating if you've ever heard of this plant or not. Not really, not so much nature, or the duality. Have nature also be able to identify the plant. Use whatever skill you kind of have available. The point is that I made a mistake, and then I contacted the player the next day after the game and said, "Hey, what I said about this, I thought about it, and that didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I would like to change that answer, to yeah, you can use your skill and maybe know about this plant and identify this plant and be able to harvest this plant with your tool proficiency." Um, and she was receptive of that and said, "Yeah, I thought that call was weird too, but I just didn't say anything." You know, it happens. Uh, my mind was really focused on Ama and delivering her instructions and her quest and her um, and what she had to say, and making sure that that interaction took place. And at that very moment, I just didn't. I could not. I know what herbalism is, and I know what nature is, and I know what survival is, but for some reason at that point in time, I could not figure out how they kind of related to each other. Um, what is the difference between herbalism and nature? Um, I went back and checked, and Xanathar's guide actually has a good example of um, herbalism. Being the knowledge of the plant and how to harvest it cleanly. And the PHB says that nature is the knowledge of the um, the lore of. So using nature as an intellect based skill, you can kind of think maybe nature's stuff that you would read in a book, or and then wisdom's the kind of stuff that you would figure out. I said wisdom. Survival is the kind of stuff that you would figure out through experience, and then herbalism is specifically about those plants and the harvesting of those plants. Um, so yeah, do not be afraid to backtrack and admit to your players, hey, I made a mistake. I would like to change that answer. Don't wait. You don't have to wait for them to come to you. Once you've realized, like, man, that was kind of weird, just go ahead and admit it and move on. And I think that they'll start to trust you a little bit more, that if you make a mistake, that you're willing to own up to it and say, hey, I really didn't like how that went. It happened. We'll move forward from there. But I think from here on out, I would like it to kind of be this way. Just have a conversation with your players. Keep those lines of communication open, and don't make it about you versus them. You might hear that a lot in a lot of DM tips videos. It's about the story primarily. Uh, don't make it about the character sheet. Um, you know, the character sheet and the rules and the lore and all that stuff is your vessel to make the story happen. Um, the story does not get in the way of the rules. That's really not a terribly good way of looking at it. Um, the rules are there to help facilitate the story. You know, um, this guy wants to swing his sword. What's a fair way of determining whether or not it hits? What's a good way of determining whether or not it deals a lot of damage? That's where the dice and stuff come in. But narratively, he swings his sword, and you can look at the dice and say you did 1 damage, so you nick his arm, or you crit and you slam that sword right up against his cheek, scarring his cheek permanently. Um, Remember those kinds of things that you say in the narrative, and if you start bringing them up later, um, players will appreciate that there's some sort of permanency in the world as well. We're not just resetting back to zero after every, or resetting to full hit points after every combat or every long rest. Um, and so we're sitting here at these woods, and I start asking them where they're going. So they decide to go to the river. They spend the 2 days doing that. And then they decide to cross the river, head 5 days south, rest, and then head for the 3 days east. And at this point, the trees are beginning to look different. They're beginning to look blackened. They're twisted and gnarled. And at this point, the Goodberry spell stops. This player is like, I'm starting to feel uneasy. I am not going to create Goodberry to feed the party from here on out. You guys start using your rations. And so that was interesting that, the first couple of nights they used their rations. The third night, the druid's like, hey, I got this spell. And so they started doing the Goodberry thing for the rest of the trip. Helped saving on those rations a little bit. And then we got kind of close, and this stuff started happening, and she was like, yeah, I'm not going to cast Goodberry today. If we have to, you guys, use your rations and stuff. And that was interesting. That was an interesting, just short little interaction that was neat. Paying attention to rations helped facilitate that this druid's power was feeding them. And so they get there. One of the players at watch decides to investigate these gnarled trees, and she touches one, and one of the pieces of bark comes off and has this sticky residue to it, almost like the tree is just falling apart. And then they continue into the swamp, and they come across these skeletal remains that has some of their flesh still on, and there's bugs and stuff crawling all over it. And then they're walking around. They see, as the last bit of sunlight hits, they see a glint of something metallic just in the distance, and there's some coins basically sitting in the sticky residue that's going between the trees. And then one of the players rolls a good perception. I say, you notice this ripple of water, and this thing starts to stick its head up out of the water, and it's just its snout and its eyes sticking above. And at first there was this short conversation of, is this a crocodile? The guy was hunting for crocodiles earlier. But then it laughs at them and climbs up out of the water and spreads out its wings, and now I've got a black dragon wormling standing in front of my party, and they are already starting to have that panic moment. And then I say, he tells them, they look like fresh meat, and he is going to enjoy ripping the flesh off their bones. And then I concluded the session. Major cliffhanger. Now they've got all week to think about, we are about to fight this black dragon. We're level 1 characters. And what are we going to do? And it was exciting. And I believe everybody really enjoyed themselves. And we are going to continue dealing with this campaign and the story, and see where it goes. I don't know where it's going to go. I think a lot of DMs, they feel like they have to plan the story out, each section, beginning, middle, and like where are we going to be at level 8, where are we going to be at level 13, and then the the players go off in some other tangent, and you get all these remarks about, oh, I had this well crafted NPC, and they didn't want to talk to him. Okay, you know, move on. Don't have your story be as fluid as the world. At least try to have these different options, and feel free to change things up. If they don't go after the bandits, well, who is somebody going after the bandits? If they're not, then the bandits are going free for how long? Well, I'm keeping track of the time, and so the bandits we're here on the 6th, and so now we're almost ending the month of arrows, and oh, maybe they've recruited a couple more people. Maybe they've acquired some extra gold. Maybe they've moved their camp from one place to another. They're kind of moving around a little bit. You know, um, Progress each one of the stories that they didn't go on a little bit, and make them feel a little real. But definitely have solutions to the problems. The thing that I always ask myself is, if the players do nothing with this storyline, how is it going to progress? How is it going to resolve with no intervention from the players? And that's a good way of thinking about it. Your world exists. Your world existed prior to the players putting their characters in there, and it should exist after your players kind of finish playing around in your world. The player character had a birthday and a death day in your world, either through old age or being killed by the sword. The point is that your world needs to live before and after those dates, and it should not require that PC to exist. And so, what is the history of these bandits? How did they start? Um, why are they around? Why are they doing what they're doing? Just kind of ask yourself some of these questions, and that can help fuel your imagination for what's going on with them. And if given enough time, what lengths are they willing to go to acquire whatever they're acquiring? It could just be money. Maybe they're tired of living in poverty and they just want to steal things and get rich. Um, is there somebody in a nearby town or village or city that is going to take notice of that and do something about it? How long is that going to take? And the answer to that question can determine how long do the players have to do something about this quest before, or to do something about these bandits before somebody else has kind of done it for them. And so, a couple months down the road, did they get to be such a big problem that there's a bunch of soldiers clambering around in the woods now? What does that do for any other tasks that they're trying to do? All of a sudden, they're running into guards all throughout the woods, having to show papers, proving that they're not who they think they're looking for. Um, you know, just progressing, just thinking about this quest a little bit, and what's going on with it. What would have happened with this quest had the players just decided, I'm just completely uninterested in this, and I never want to see this quest, and I never want to resolve this quest. I want to go somewhere else. And in doing that exercise, you can kind of help make that, it's not going to sit there and wait for them. It's not World of Warcraft. Somebody's not just standing in town with an exclamation point over their head and saying, hey, I got this thing for you to do, just because you're the player character. Just like a Ma. Do you have training in cultivating herbs? If not, I don't need you. I'll get somebody else to do this. Um, I'll get somebody else to go retrieve my friend's body if you're not going to do it. I'm surely not going to pay you 50 crowns a person when I feel like what I'm offering you is a fair deal. Um, I'm not going to wait around for these bandits to just kill everybody on the road until you decide to get up off your ass and do something about it. Um, and you know, I am hoping that somebody will go find my missing brother. If nobody will, maybe I will do something about it. Maybe I'll go looking for him myself. Just ask yourself the question, and then that way when the players start looking for this information, you will know or have an idea of what has changed about this since they last went in the woods and so they spent 20 days in the woods. In my situation, they're probably gonna be just at the end of arrows. They started on the 6th, and they started on the 6th of arrows, and now they're on the 18th, and all I have to do is go, okay, well, that much time has passed. Maybe they're here along that progression that I thought of, and you can just make a note of that in your story notes and say this is how it's gonna resolve if nothing else happens. Does it get fixed, or does it just get worse and blown out of proportion? Um, and that may be the best takeaway for this process. We're going to be playing the next session Saturday. It's going to be 6 o'clock Eastern time, and I will put a link to the description of the channel that we're streaming this campaign on. And you can watch it live, and then I will try to throw up another journal entry, so to speak, of my thoughts and where my head was at during this process. And good luck to everyone trying to start their own campaign. And I wish you the best of luck, and try not to have your campaign explode into flames, as most of us have had that experience, and it's very ugly. And you just learn from it. So good luck with that, and I'm gonna try to have, if there's a future video, go ahead and try and put that in the window up there for you to click on. And we'll see you later.